Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, and I'm here with Janelle Allbritton, publisher of WestchesterCountyPost.com, whose master's degree in public health will come in handy during this conversation. And we're here to talk about whether there should be high school sports in Westchester County and New York City, first in the fall season, which is coming up, of course, and then even maybe for the entire year. To give you some background now, before we get into specifically to high school, local high school, you should know, and this is being videoed on Saturday morning, July 10th, so a lot has been happening in the last 2 days and a lot more will happen in the next few days. But the Ivy League a few days ago, as you may have heard, has decided to not have any fall sports, in fact, not even winter sports, nothing before January 1, 2021. There's a question as to whether or not there'll be football in the spring as opposed to the fall. That's been talked about as an option in Westchester County as well. And a lot of people didn't really pay attention to the Ivy League. It is D1, but it's, Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Cornell, Columbia, those kinds of schools. But yesterday, the Big Ten announced, and the Big Ten, of course, is a Power 5 conference. The Big Ten announced that they were only going to play a in-conference schedule, which means they'll only play 9 games. They will not play a full 12-game schedule. You'll miss a lot of big-time games like against, non-Big Ten opponents like Notre Dame, for example, or Oregon. There was a game scheduled. But I just want to read the essence of what the Big Ten announcement is. And this is from Kevin Warren, the new commissioner of the Big Ten. He's been in his job for 7 months. The Big Ten is reducing fall sports season to only conference games. This affects not only football, but men and women's cross country, field hockey, men and women's soccer, and women's volleyball. And this all assumes, and this is a quote now, that the public health officials advise that we can play it all. So that's a pretty radical thing, where here's the commissioner of the Big Ten, a Power 5 conference, saying, I don't know, we may not be able to play the season, and at least to his credit, he's focusing on the science. So I'll turn it over to you, Janelle Allbritton, to talk about the science. What's your view of it, big picture? And of course, what's your view of it for Westchester County high school kids and New York City high school kids?
All right, thank you, Steve, for that. I would rather leave the details and the granular stuff to you. You're very good at doing that research, and you've got your finger on the pulse. I would like to kind of get the more bird's eye view, and I just discovered a website today, thanks to the Daily News. Trevor Noah's team interviewed a young man who put this together. He's a 17-year-old young man who put this website together that pulls together a lot of the statistics. And the website is CoViD-2019.live. And it's got all these quick facts. You can scroll through and see what's happening by country. It's got massive statistics on confirmed cases, critical cases, dead, total active, total recovered, and 153 total vaccines in development. I did not know that. So if you look at the numbers of the United States compared with the other countries, for example, the total deaths in the US is now up to 135,869. The world total is 558,325. At the moment, we have the highest percentage of dead in the world. And to me, as a public health professional, that means we're doing something wrong. And we've been doing things wrong since the very beginning. So this young man started this website in January because he got the information about it. So there's a lot that we're doing wrong in the US, and unfortunately, the 3 T's: testing, tracing, and treatment. We are too far behind the ball to really catch up with it now. Unfortunately, we haven't done it right, and now we're paying the price. So we didn't have enough testing in the beginning for whatever reason. I'm not here to point fingers, but we didn't have enough testing, so we didn't know who was positive. And when you don't know who's positive, you can't do tracing. You can't talk to the person who tested positive to see where they've been, who they've been with, what parties they've attended, what churches or choir practice or bar mitzvahs or weddings, birthday parties that they've attended, because one person can easily infect 15 to 20 people at an event. So, and then if each of those people goes on to infect another 20 people, you can see how the number gets big very fast. Why people are refusing to wear masks, it completely escapes me. Why they recently announced that the virus is airborne, I don't understand that either. It's always been airborne, but as I say before, this virus isn't Tinkerbell. It doesn't just fly around by itself. It travels in droplets of moisture that then floats in the air. So the purpose of a mask, even if it's a scarf, is to catch the larger droplets that are naturally coming out of your mouth when you're talking or laughing or whatever. Without the mask, that aerosol evaporates just a little bit and it turns into smaller droplets, which can then stay airborne for longer. But it's the droplets that are airborne, not the virus all by itself. Okay, it's not like dust mites that float around when you're cleaning in the attic. So wear a mask, distance, don't go to rallies, don't go to big events. If you must go, if you decide to go like to a protest, do your best to distance and absolutely wear a mask, and do the best you can. I know a number of people who've been to protests, and they say that everyone at the protest they went to was very respectful, and they were doing a good job at distancing. So as for sports, just think about it. If you are doing anything athletic, you're going to be breathing more deeply, same as singing. It's all about the breathing and oxygen. You're breathing more deeply, and so whatever's in the air around you, you're breathing it in to the very lowest part of your lungs. And when you're physically active, you're going to breathe more, you're going to have more aerosol. There's even a special kind of photography that shows the mist coming out of people's mouths when they're talking or coughing or sneezing. And so just check on under wellness on Westchester County Post. There'll be resources posted up there on a regular basis. And I just ask people to engage your brain, try to step away from the politics. I don't want to get involved in the politics with this. I am passionate about saving lives because, you know, when I see the governor, DeSantis of Florida say, oh, well, the good news is that the cases that we're seeing now are in younger people in their 20s and 30s, and they tend to be more healthy and they tend to be stronger and they tend to be more likely to survive COVID. The problem I have with that is that these infections were preventable, first of all, and secondly, even if you don't have pre-existing conditions, even if you think you're healthy, COVID can kill you. And if it doesn't kill you, it can seriously damage your lungs, and it could take months to recover, and you may not have a full recovery from this illness. So it's not to be taken lightly, because even if only 1% die, if the person who died is someone you love, that's 100% to you, isn't it? And what makes the loss even worse is that it was preventable. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So that's really the global framework that I'm learning every day, and I'm teaching, and I'm sharing, and I'm encouraging people, just wear a mask. Just wear a mask.
Thanks for that summary, Janelle. I'll try and bring it now directly to sports because while the Big Ten doing what they've done is a big deal, they certainly haven't put off the season, although they recognize the possibility that there will be no sports, which is a good thing at this stage. You've just gone over, all the problems that we're having throughout the country. New York has beaten the worst of it, of course, but you don't know whether it can come back or not. And people will be familiar with the one student, Greeley High School in Chappaqua, came back from Florida, went to the high school, went to his graduation, which you were supposed to stay in your car, and apparently he didn't, or he went to some other place to meet with his friends, and poof, in a week, 27 people directly from that contact were diagnosed with COVID-19. So that in and of itself gives at least me a clue as to what could happen if you have, I don't know, linemen on either side of a football game banging heads 50, 60 times a day, both sides of the ball, both teams. So I just want to read one more thing from the commissioner of the, not from the commissioner, from an athletic director in the SEC, Southeastern Conference, LSU, Alabama, some of the top schools in the country. What he said anonymously as quoted in Sports Illustrated. And again, this is an anonymous Southeastern Conference athletic director quote. I think spring is more viable than fall. What we have currently scheduled is not realistic. If somebody told me we could play conference only in the fall, that would be great. But I'm not sure we can play one game, let alone a full conference schedule. So already you can see this turning from nobody to the Ivy League canceling everything till January, now to the Big Ten announcing we're only going to play a conference-only schedule if the public health people allow us to. When you take that down to the high school level, keep in mind, of course, I know a lot of you know Clemson. The Clemson football team, one of the top teams in the country, if not the top team in the country, had 37 positive tests. Alabama and LSU, two of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country, both had in the 20s. And this is at the college level. So the professionals are going to have all the money, all the testing, all the everything. The colleges are going to have a lot more resources than the high schools, and they're already kind of walking away from this. In addition, now in New York City, I don't think it's been discussed in Westchester yet, but in New York City, the mayor has already said your kids are probably going to go to school K through 12, 1 to 3 days a week. So how you can play sports, how you can, for example, take a high school football team in a bus or 2 buses or 3 buses to go to play a game anywhere on the road strikes me as almost impossible. How you're going to have social distancing during football practice strikes me as impossible. So I think seriously right now, and I know we're all waiting for Governor Cuomo to say whether you can even start to practice. So the high schools aren't even practicing, and here we are almost in mid-July. So as Yogi Berra used to say, it gets late early, so it's getting late early now. And I think everyone has to focus on the bigger picture, which is these kids will not play in a bubble. They will go home to their families every day. They will be in classes every day with, we don't know how many people, or we don't know how many days, but a few days a week or every day with, 20, 30, 40 people. We don't even know what the school setup is, let alone what the sports setup is. So I think coaches and parents, and frankly players, if you're old enough, juniors or seniors in high school, have to seriously consider, frankly, the intelligence, the safety, the public health of playing anything in the fall, and at a minimum thinking about football as it looks like maybe the Southeastern Conference is going to go there. The Pac-12 is apparently ready to announce something similar to the Big Ten. The Big Ten has already shrunk the conference games with a lot of people thinking they're going to go to March. So they put it off, they put it off, they put it off. And as we're talking right now, there's incredibly high cases, brand new New York-like epidemics in Texas and Arizona and California, and especially Florida. So I think the wise part would be to discourage sports in the fall. I don't make this just a football issue. I read before what the Big Ten, what those other, soccer's a big deal, volleyball's a big deal. I mean, these sports, I understand football's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and they're trying to protect that because they need the money. That's the other thing. But I'll also say one other thing and hand it back to you, Janelle. What about the coaches? These coaches are in their 50s, they're in their 60s, a few of them are in their 70s. You have to be concerned about them at the high school level and at the college level. So I think that's another factor to be considered. Already we're hearing from older teachers who don't even want to go back into the classroom. They want to teach remotely. Again, that's a Governor Cuomo decision, I guess, for the state, and then it's a school district decision for the individual school districts maybe. But I think sports has to take a step back because obviously, I think obviously, public health and safety have to come first. Janelle, what are your final thoughts?
If you're dead, you can't do anything.
True.
It's hard for me to express how sad I feel about the situation here in the United States. I started my graduate program in 1994. This is before the internet, before Facebook, before I got my first email account set up. Okay, 1994 was the summer of genocide in Rwanda. So there was a lot going on at that time. And I never imagined that I would be looking at a situation like this right here in the United States. It's stunning. If I could go back in time and talk to myself in 1994, that would have been quite a conversation because I would not have believed it. And I'm still a little bit in denial. I'm having a hard time believing what I see on a daily basis. Governors aligning politically with Trump and just completely neglecting sound scientific practice. You know, Sweden, Canada, New Zealand, Japan, look at what they've done. Don't take my word for it. You can find plenty of stories about how they handled COVID. And now they've gone on with their lives. You know, in Europe, they're going to have Oktoberfest as per usual. They're having a good time. They're out on the beaches. They're back. Restaurants are open again. Their economy is bouncing back just like that. And we have done everything exactly the wrong way from the very top down. And so we have our protocol. Obviously, we're not distancing. We're less than 6 feet apart. But we're using protocol to make sure that we're killing the virus. And I can't talk much about that right now. But there is protocol out there to boost your immune system and make sure that you are lowering your risk. And that's a separate subject. If you want to know more about that, you can email me at westchestercountypost@gmail.com. And I extend my deepest condolences to those who have lost someone to COVID. I'm so sorry for your loss. We've lost our friend, the amazing coach Fred Gallo. COVID took him from us back in April. And he's one of many who could be alive today, who very well could be alive today, if this pandemic had been handled professionally from the beginning, which was starting in January when the president was first briefed. So.
And of course, that's the legendary coach, Fred Gallo, who coached at Iona Prep for 30 years. Many of you are familiar with him and his record. Coached a number of major league players, et cetera, et cetera. And we do still at westchestercountypost.com have a memoriam to him, which he well deserves. I'll just conclude by saying, I hope Governor Cuomo follows the science. He certainly has to this point. I know he's making the broader decision and everybody else is getting ready to at least maybe play, at least have practices in order. I know right now in Westchester County and in New York, there are travel teams who are playing, like, I know there's baseball in some places. I believe there's volleyball in some places, and even soccer in some places. Again, when you transfer that to the schools, the problem for me is you're going to be in class 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days. I don't think New York is going to cave to the pressure from the president and send everybody in. And again, if you're in pandemic numbers like they are in other states, you hope they don't either. But the specific decision for Westchester County and New York City, frankly, to me, is coaches, athletic directors, superintendents of schools, and of course it goes all the way up to the governor. They have to decide the risk-reward balance. It seems somewhat clear to me, at a minimum, I don't think there should be any fall sports. If you can get some in the winter, you don't know where we're going to be in 2 or 3 weeks, never mind in 2 or 3 months. But hopefully there is enough science and intelligence. I understand as well or better than most what the urge to play sports is. We got to get out there and play. It's hurting kids if they don't compete. I agree with all of that. But number one has to be public health and safety, especially for the kids. And don't forget that they go home every day. Every day they're in school and at practice, they go home to parents, maybe grandparents, maybe 8 or 9 people living in the house or a big apartment or a small apartment.
Young siblings, chemo.
Yes, and that of course can hurt in many other ways beyond the school and beyond the athletics. So this is Steve Kallas, speaking of sports, along with Janelle Allbritton, the publisher of WestchesterCountyPost.com. We'll see you the next time.